On guys, today I'm going to be walking you through my first ever custom built gaming PC. I finally pulled the trigger, so I'm going to be walking you through each individual component and as well as the buying process, why I bought each one of those components, as well as the building process. For someone that had medium knowledge of gaming as well as PC, I'm going to teach you about the struggles of your first PC build, the do's and don'ts, and really what my mindset was when I was buying this PC and why I bought each component. And then lastly, did it meet my expectations? I want to be able to game as well as the creative side of things. So Lightroom, Photoshop, video editing, I want to do all of those things very seamlessly and smooth. So did they meet my expectations? I'm going to walk you through that. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll want to build your first gaming PC. But let's get right into it. So for the CPU, I went with the Intel Core i5 9600K, so the unlocked version. The reason for this, obviously, is the 9th gen version. The reason that I went with this, it was kind of a mid-tier. When I was building the PC, obviously during the pandemic, a lot of parts weren't available. It was hard to find certain parts at different prices, at the right price, obviously. Before all this pandemic had started. So obviously I didn't want to go with the i3. i7 was a little expensive at the time, and with the unlockable version I can go up to at least an i7 within performance. And I can always upgrade with the cooler that I'll explain to you later which one I got. I can always upgrade to an i7 or i9, but this was a nice middle ground for me in order to get the performance that I wanted with gaming, as well as different platform or different applications that I'll be running on my PC. So for RAM, I went with the Trident Z RGB. So this is the DDR4 version. So it comes with two sticks, each 8 GB. So total in the PC I have 16 GB. So I just went with this version because from either recommendation, I like the control of RGB as well, and 16 GB just gave me enough for doing multitasking. So if I Photoshop, Lightroom, and running Premiere Pro, I can do all three of those things. I don't know why at the same time, but definitely Photoshop and Lightroom is a big. I need more RAM, and as well as I can keep upgrading this to 32 GB or wherever my needs change. For memory, I went with Intel's M.2 SSD 6. So this is going to be their 1 TB version. I plan on upgrading. I know you're going to look at this whole build and go, is it going to need more storage? I could have gone with like a 512 GB version and then maybe more SSD on kind of the backside, or even external for like my photography, video, whatnot. So I'm still trying to figure out my memory plan. I definitely, I already have external, so figuring out the system of that as well as adding SSD. And then I have another M.2 slot as well, so I can utilize that and just keep adding on to my memory. There's no short of slots or places where I can add memory. So for another thing that's also on the motherboard, I'm kind of walking you through each component. I went with the GeForce RTX 2070 Super. This is the MSI version. The reason for this was I knew going with the i5 9600K, I didn't want to go too overpowered with the graphics card. Obviously I wanted to find a nice balance as well as pricing, and like I said before, finding certain components at a good price was not the easiest during this pandemic. But I thought this is nice mid-tier as well. Going with the 2070 Super. I could have gone with the 2060 Super, but just I run 2K on this ultra wide, so I need a little bit more performance for my graphics, as well as it has some really cool RGB, as you can kind of see in the background. Not really, you'll see on the B-roll as well, but there's RGB kind of all on the bottom with the 2 fans. But I just really like this brand, as well as MSI goes with my MSI motherboard. It just comes some synchronicity when it comes to different brands throughout my PC build. So to cool the CPU, I went with the NZXT Kraken X63. For their 2-fan version, they have the Kraken X63 and the 53. That's for the non-LCD display. I'm sure you've seen them really cool on Instagram or social media where you can put different images. This is just the ring light kind of mirrored effect, as you can see it kind of in the B-roll. But I went with this over air-cooled one. I had a little more money to spend on this. I think there was a deal going on, and just air coolers and especially liquid coolers were really hard to get at the time. But just with my case being NZXT, which I'll go through later, it just made kind of sense you know, with compatibility and the way that they have, you know, wiring set up and whatnot. And I like the performance and the specs and ratings and everything that came along with this. And I find that it cools the PC really well. You know, I'm not going to go into air cooled versus liquid cooled, especially if you're not really familiar with PCs in general. But I just like the look of the mirror effect, and I knew the performance was going to be top notch out of this. And even if I would go to an i7, I could easily do that. So finally, what am I putting all of this on? Like I said, the graphics was MSI, and that was because I got an MSI motherboard. I did a lot of research, you know, on Newegg, if you're not aware, which is a really good tool to use. You can kind of build your whole PC, and it'll be not to the T, but it'll tell you what's compatible. So like if you click on like your RAM, it'll tell you which RAM will work with your PC. Sometimes it's like I said, on the T, but sometimes, like when I chose I believe my SSD, it had on an AMD version, not an Intel version. So stuff like that where it messes up, but it's a really good kind of tool to use to figure out, you know, what's going to be compatible size-wise and different things like that. But I went with the MSI MPG Z390. This is going to be their gaming Pro Carbon version. So as you can see in the B-roll, they have kind of different kind of carbon accents along the way with a little bit of RGB as well as backlit. There's a kind of a row on the kind of right hand side, which is really cool. But I just felt that I had enough PCI ports. I had 2 M.2 slots as well, and just really good reviews. And then, you know, with the MSI and the graphics card, it just made sense to go together. So with this motherboard, it does not come with internal Wi-Fi, so I had to get an external, which I was okay with because I felt like this would just perform better. And actually, to be honest with you, I had this before I even built the PC. I had it for something previously. So this is the Netgear Nighthawk AC 1900. So this is going to be plugged into your USB. You can see that kind of in the B-roll. I kind of put that in a very weird place, but it's on my desk. It has a magnetic bottom, which is really cool. So you can kind of have that shark fin you see a lot of the times on PCs. You can put on your top and the side. You know, obviously a lot of these cases are going to be metal. You can put on your desk because it comes with a stand, or you can just plug it directly into your PC, which I think kind of leaves a lot of clutter, and especially if you're plugging other USBs in, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that base option is really nice, and I get great network performance out of this. And plus, I already had it, so I didn't have to spend money or, you know, look for a different motherboard. So you're probably asking, what's powering all this? This was an interesting decision. Obviously, I knew that I wanted to do fully modular, just in case I want to do some expansion in the future. But I went with the Corsair RM series. This is their RM 750, so 750 watts. I just felt, you know, with being the 80 plus gold, they've got a 10-year warranty. I just know Corsair is a really good brand. I had a lot of recommendations from people that were, like I said, a little bit of help. They were able to recommend some really good brands, and this is one of them. I just feel like 750 wasn't too overkill, wasn't too underkill. I don't plan on running dual graphics cards, two 2080s or anything crazy like that, especially in this mid-tower build. Wouldn't even work. But this just got the job done. If I want to go to an i7, i9, this could easily power that, plus the graphics cards. That's kind of where my mind was when I was getting this, and this is how the whole machine is being powered. Now we come to the case, everything that the components are sitting in. I didn't want to drop a box on myself, so we are running the NZXT H510i. So you have the non-I version and the I, and then you have the Elite. Kind of gets a little more complicated. The only difference you can see in the B-roll is with the Elite you have that front kind of glass panel, whereas the I and non-I version has kind of, you can see in the B-roll as well, has kind of that front panel with the NZXT logo on the bottom half. But I just went with the I because I didn't want to spend, I think it was like $30-40 extra just for that glass panel, you know. So I saved a little bit of money. And then the I versus the non-I version just has 2 RGB strips, which I thought was really cool. I plan on expanding with Underglow. NZXT has their whole ecosystem, so I plan on expanding with that. The case is really good. It's a mid-tower PC case. Their whole ecosystem works with my you know, the cooler, the CPU cooler. I plan on upgrading to 2 RGB fans, one for the intake and exhaust, as you can see in the B-roll as well. But it was just looking through the different cases, and I heard a lot of great things about NZXT. Their build quality is really well. Their cable management when I got the case, which made my life a ton easier. You know, like I said, I had a little bit of help, but there were times where I didn't. So that cable management made it a lot easier. They have a whole control box for all the fans and all of the RGB components. and that just screws in right into the back, which makes it super easy. You've got thumb screws, everything just made sense. So that's why I went with this case. So now that I've kind of walked through, you know, the buying part, why I bought certain things, this PC kind of came out to around 1700. That's including Windows, but I don't know if you really consider that in the price of your PC of all the parts. But I wanted to be able to game at a very high performance, you know, with, you know, and leading into the next section, which is the expectations. So this is a 2K display. You know, just for an example, I'm running Call of Duty Modern Warfare and just multiplayer. I'm running maybe at around 150 at 2K. So 180 I could easily get, maybe 170, 180, push that. And then for Warzone I'm getting about 110, 120 at 2K. So if you can only imagine being able to go up to 1080, how much more FPS I'd be able to get, obviously with upgrading monitors and stuff like that. If I want to do like a dual monitor or triple monitor setup. So for the buying mindset, it was keeping it within a reasonable budget, as well as doing all the things I wanted to do and do them easily. So that was a big part, you know, in mindset of, you know, what do I want for my PC and how much am I willing to spend. And I think that's the most important part, is understanding how much you're willing to spend and setting that limit. Because if you go on, like I said, using the tool on Newegg, there's a PC part builder or picker or something like that. I use Newegg, but you can start seeing adding a bunch of products that it really adds to your price. So my one recommendation is just pick a price. You know, pick a max that you're willing to spend, maybe even a minimum, and kind of find a happy medium, which is what I did. As well as during the pandemic, I had certain limits on what I could buy. But ideally, I love this build. I love the performance. I love the look of it. I'm a big aesthetic person. You see, I got my hue lights in the back, and that's a big part and you know, very important to me. And so I think I feel like I got all of that out of this PC, and I think it performs to exactly how I want it, with both gaming and the creative side, you know, Photoshop, Lightroom, as well as video editing. So yeah, that's the buying process. Let's get right into the building process. So I had a little bit of help. I have a neighbor, and he's really good with building PCs. He's done a lot for his job, and it just made sense. I tried to build it myself. I was on the phone with my friends that had been convincing me to build a PC, and they were to help to a certain point, but they weren't in my room trying to build my PC. So I was able to get his help and guidance, obviously with me building it and just kind of him looking over and making sure I wasn't breaking anything. It was very scary to me. I'm sure when you start to build your own PC, or even if you haven't but you're thinking about it, maybe that's one of your thoughts. I don't want to break a pin, and it's, you know, if I break a pin, that's it, right? So it's not too scary of a thing. Just make sure that you do have someone. YouTube videos are really helpful, you know, Linus Tech Tips. There's a lot of different YouTube channels out there and videos with even just like little wiring up to actually how to build a whole PC. I know Linus Tech Tips has done like a POV version, which is really helpful. But make sure at least you have one person that you can really trust, and just call up and say, hey, you know, I have a cousin that's really into PC that I was like, hey, I have this question. He's able to answer that. Building the PC side of things, I wouldn't worry too much. Just make sure you have the resources, you've done your research, you understand at least a basic knowledge by watching YouTube videos, different articles, looking at all the different components, and really understanding at least a basic line knowledge of how a PC works and how things go together. And trust me, once you start learning videos and maybe talking to friends and talking to people that have done it already, looking on forums, there's a lot of forums out there, especially on Reddit, and just understanding that you're not alone, and it's not that hard of a process. It's not that scary, because once you do it, trust me, the next one that you build, or if you redo or revamp your PC, you're going to be an absolute pro at it. It's just that first initial time is kind of a little scary, which is very understandable. So the building component, as much as I was sweating and just about to pass out because I'd been there for probably 5, 6, way too many hours, I had figured it out, and I know for the next time that I could easily build another PC. If I want to go to 10th gen, I could easily revamp this PC. I just walked through all of the components, walked through the buying process, why I buy certain product over others, as well as my plans for upgrading and allowing space availability to upgrade as well, and then lastly the building process, how it went for me and how hopefully it'll go for you. So hopefully now that you've watched this whole video, you're going to want to build your first gaming PC. Just do it. You got to pull the trigger. I know you're going to keep thinking about it, but just pull the trigger. Do it. You'll never regret it. Especially when you get into the peripherals of gaming. I mean, you get into Razer keyboard, you get to hear that beautiful sound, as well as, you know, the clicking of the mouse and customizing everything down to the mouse pad. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, please like, leave a comment below what you want to see next. If you thought this was helpful, and thanks for watching the video. Build that PC. You better.